Hello everyone. In today's presentation, we'll talk about the types of academic evidence. If you remember in my previous presentation, I have talked about how to read an academic article. And today I will continue to explain more about academic evidence to give you a background about what are the types or the genre of the academic evidence. So we have the classical evidence-based pyramid that you see in front of you here. So this one classify the evidence according to their strength, according to what level we can rely on such kind of evidence. And at the bottom of the pyramid or at the base of the pyramid, we have the background information or the expert opinion. This is the least strong evidence where someone talk about their experience or what they have seen in the past years according to what they have learned about this topic. So it can be taken as evidence, like you say, my professor mentioned that, but you cannot rely on it or generalize it for the rest of the condition that you might see. So it's a weak evidence, but still the expert opinion can be considered. So higher level than this, we have group of studies, we call them unfiltered information, but still it's supported evidence because it has data support for the evidence. And this group include the case control studies, case series, and case reports at the same level. And the difference is case reports are one single case you have seen during your practice. It's very interesting. You want to report it. You mention the findings of that case. You publish it to share it with the concerned scientific community. But it's not a way to prove something. The case series is one level higher, like group of cases share the same information, the same characteristics, the same treatment, the same diagnosis, and you report them as case series, but still it's not enough to generalize the facts that you get from those cases. The case control is a little bit different because you run a study, you have the intention to take cases and controls for certain condition and study them to conclude the relationship between risk factors and diseases. I will explain more about these types of studies in the coming slides, but now I'm trying to stratify the strength of evidence. Higher than this, we have the cohort studies, and it means group of patients followed over a period of time. That's why it's stronger, because it's not a snapshot at some point of time. No, we have follow-up for years for this group of individuals, so we can study the ongoing exposures for this group, so we can make better evidence. A higher level is the randomized control studies or RCTs, and this is interventional studies where we go further about the disease and we give some intervention to see the implications of that intervention. So it's definitely stronger than just the observational studies where we just conclude from the facts that we have. The remaining group of studies are higher level in terms of they are filtered information or well-supported evidence. And these are the critically appraised individual articles or critically appraised topics. And the higher level of the evidence hierarchy are the systematic reviews and meta-analysis. So the critically appraised articles or researches are researches had been subject to expertise critique to refine the findings of that research and make conclusions that from that kind of studies, we reach the guidelines and protocols for disease management, or guidelines for what to go about certain conditions according to the evidence that we got from the filtered, critically appraised studies. And as I said, the higher level in the hierarchy are the systematic reviews and meta-analysis, which is a group of studies that tackle certain topic, a specific condition or disease, and we gather all the information or all the studies that had been done about this topic in the previous years in different languages sometimes, published and unpublished sometimes. So we collect the pile of the studies about certain topic and we make conclusions out of that. That's why it's higher in the hierarchy, because it's basically getting everything had been done before and making conclusions out of that. So the classification of studies, other than based on the strengths of the study, can be done according to the way the studies are run. Whether it's observational studies, where the researchers just observe and make conclusions and connections, or it's interventional studies. And the interventional studies are basically the RCT, or randomized control trials. The observational studies, as we mentioned in the hierarchy, they can be case series. And we mentioned that's a group of individuals share the same diagnosis, have the same treatment and outcomes. And the conclusion out of that is just description, right? So it's descriptive studies. The cross-sectional are snapshots. So they are snapshots of the situation. Sorry. So it's a snapshot for what we have at this point of time, right? So this is why they call it a snapshot. And we run the cross-sectional to get the prevalence of disease. So we take group of patients, group of individuals, and we see who have the disease and who don't have the disease, and we make that conclusions about what are the risk factors that lead to that disease, but we cannot make conclusion about the causality, right? So we can just make connection. There is association between this risk factor and this outcome and this disease, but we cannot make sure that this is the cause. It's not the idea. The case control studies, on the other hand, are different. Why? Because we start from the beginning mindfully selecting the individuals according to whether they have the disease that we are studying or not, whether they are cases, that means they are patients, or controls. And we try to select the controls from individuals who share the same characteristics of the patients, the only difference that they don't have the disease, to see what else have led to getting the disease in the patients and not getting the disease in the controls. And the measure that we use to make this comparison are the odd ratios. For cohort studies, as I said, it's a group of individuals followed over years. It can be retrospective or prospective. It depends on whether we start with the risk factors and non-risk factors and follow them over years. This is prospective. Or we start in the present and we look into the past to see what had been going on in the past. This is a cohort study. There are other studies like the twin concordance studies and the adoption studies. This group of studies are usually to study the connection between the diseases and the genetics. like the heritability of the condition versus the environmental impact. So for the twin concordance, you start with the twins who share the same genetics, but they might have different exposures. So to make conclusions about what environmental factors had impacted the occurrence of the disease. For the adoption is the opposite. You take adopted children and compare them with their siblings in the same environment, but they don't share their genetics. So you can make conclusion about the impact of the genetic in that disease. Finally, the ecological studies, and this is mostly about population health, right? So we study group of patients, not individuals. For example, a city in comparison to a different city. What are the risk factors for the individuals living in this area? Urban versus rural area. Group of population in certain neighborhood have exposure to certain risk factor in comparison to a different neighborhood, a country in comparison to a different country, and so on. It's population health studies. So I think I talked briefly about the timing of the studies, but you can get further information from these slides. It's about the time when we run the study and whether we are looking just at the present in case control study, cross-sectional studies, or we are running the study in the present and we are looking in the past. That's in case control studies and retrospective cohort studies. Or we are running the study in the present and we are looking into the future in prospective cohort studies. So all the previous studies are observational studies in terms of we don't intervene by doing nothing other than we collect the data, we analyze it, we conclude. And the difference between that and between the clinical trials or the RCTs is that in the clinical trial, we are intervening by doing active intervention. So it's experimental studies. So usually it includes human subject. Most of the time is to test the benefit of a new treatment or a new vaccination, for example, and compare that to the traditional modality that is used right now. And the main characteristic of the clinical trials are they should be randomized, they should be controlled. As much as possible, they need to be double blind or sometimes triple blind. When we say double blind, like neither the patient nor the researcher know who is in each group, whether the interventional group or the control group, that they have the traditional modality, and sometimes triple, even the statistician who run the analysis, they don't know. And that makes the strength of the clinical trials. So in depth, there are further details, like sometimes they can be crossover, like you switch the groups who have the different intervention that we are studying. And the analysis, it can be either intention to treat or per protocol. For intention to treat, you never exclude any drop out, any patient who died during the study or they opt out electively, they choose not to continue. You just include everyone that you have enrolled into your study. But for per protocol analysis, no, you just analyze whoever finished the study with you all the way to the end, and you follow the protocol. So you exclude any dropouts, any patient who skip the continuation of the study, you don't include in your analysis, and that might put you at risk of bias. So the best is the intention to treat analysis. I don't want to go further and detail in depth about the clinical trials, but whoever is interested, there are 4 phases. Start with phase 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And it depends on various characteristics, number of individuals, the way you do it, and each phase targeting certain outcomes, like whether you are checking just for the safety of the medicine or the intervention that you are doing, this, or you are testing the efficacy, that's in phase two, or you are testing the effectiveness of the intervention, or in the last phase, you are testing for the adverse effect after you send your new modality of treatment to the market and test for the adverse effect for the post-market surveillance. So a different way to classify the academic evidence is according to the methods that we use for the study. So it can be divided into qualitative or quantitative study. This is also a way for classifying the scholarly articles or studies, and sometimes they call it the genre of the evidence. So yeah. So let's start with the quantitative research. And this is aiming to measure and quantify the evidence in terms of numerical data. The main characteristic of quantitative research, it has numerical data, it's numbers, right? So we use statistical software to analyze the numerical data because sometimes it's a huge volume. We use different software like SAS, R, Spaces, Stata, whatever. The idea is we have numbers, we analyze those numbers to reach conclusions. It's different from the qualitative, where we will discuss in the next slide. Sorry, let's continue. As I said, on the other hand, the qualitative studies or the qualitative research is usually textual data. We gather that data from interviews. It's verbal interviews with whoever subject to our studies, patients, healthcare leaders, stakeholders, whoever. We gather textual data, not numerical, not numbers, not like whether you have something or not have something, whether you exposed or not exposed to something. It's not that, it's textual, where we ask questions and we get answers. So the aim of the qualitative studies is to explore and understand inside of the individuals that we are interviewing. And the analysis is totally different. It's thematic analysis. There are also softwares to do that, but it's totally different. We have to code the information first and then analyze it. Sometimes the researchers find it complicated, but really it's a good source for information that you don't gather by numbers. So, and in many times researchers use both modalities in their research, both qualitative and quantitative, to reach the maximum of the benefit of that study. So I think I will stop here, and by that we conclude the presentation about the genre of academic evidence, and we can speak further about various topics related to this in the future. Thank you so much and enjoy.